just share with us how big is your Muslim workforce here?
We have a 10,000 employee population here in Marina Bay Sands, and of that, about 800 of our team members are Muslim, so roughly about 8%.
Okay, and then what about this Book of Puasa initiative that you have with them? And this is done on
Okay, so we have, this is our 8th event, 8th time that we are doing this for Marina Bay Sands, so that we can actually show our appreciation to all our team members who are actually working during the fasting hours. So we want to show our appreciation to them. This event is open to both Muslims and non-Muslims team members, so we can actually have an open bonding session together to appreciate each other's culture. So we break fast together, Muslims and non-Muslim team members.
So you did say 8th, that means it goes on a yearly basis?
Yes, every time during the Ramadan period, we will identify a date, and then we will plan for an event with the meals included, so that we all break fast together.
Cool. All right, what are the operation hours for Muslim employees, especially during the Ramadan month here in MBS? And then is it round the clock?
Yeah, so we are still at 24/7 operational hours because we are integrated resort. However, for our Muslim team members, we actually make a lot of accommodation to suit their needs. So for example, like 7 p.m. we will have a halal buffet dinner prepared for them so that they can break fast. Or we also have our supervisors, we train our supervisors to actually make sure that the roster is actually flexible for them so that they can actually also break fast at the time that they require. For example, in the limo department, our limo drivers are on a roster and a schedule, so they will be, for the Muslim ones, they actually will be scheduled so that they can actually have the time to go and break fast even during their work hours.
What has made NBS employ or adopt this kind of work time?
Okay. Yeah, so it's we are 10,000 people. We operate in Singapore. We have large festive celebrations. So Muslim component is actually a very big important part. So of course there's Chinese and there's the Deepavali situation. So for the Muslim, we therefore will celebrate all our major festive celebrations together. So this is a very it's a way that we can actually show our appreciation more deeply according to the customs for the Muslims. So that's where the idea was born.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Iftar 2019.
Okay.
For a couple of years, did you start off with MBS too?
Yeah, I'm actually one of the pre-opening team. Joined the company in December 2008. So it's been almost 11 years.
So it must be really good working here that you have been keeping yourself here.
Yes.
So
yes.
could you just share with us how do you actually work as a team during the Ramadan period with the rest of your other members?
Okay, we have a very strong teamwork culture here in Marina Bay Sands. For example, you have team members who are non-Muslim would cover the duties, especially during the breaking of fast. Yeah, and also departments such as transportation and security, they actually would arrange among themselves with regards to the break time without the need arrangement by the supervisors.
Right, so it's very easy to have everybody working together.
That's right.
During this time. What about the MBS? How is it, or what have they done to actually ensure that everybody is happy working during this Ramadan period, for Muslims especially?
Okay, so actually, I would like to share with you a little bit about the kind of food that we serve for staff, especially during the breaking of fast and the sahur. Fresh food are actually being prepared, especially for Muslim during this time. And also a lot of Malay kuehs that has been prepared and served during the breaking of fast. And this is changed at every single time. So every day they have a different kind of dessert for the staff to enjoy. And in hope that during this time the staff are able to nourish themselves, working without having to drink and eat the entire day, and also keep their morale high.
So this buka puasa that they have on a yearly basis, it's been the eighth time this time.
Yeah, this is the 8th time.
Is it something that you have some views about, what you think about it, what the staff?
I think it's a good initiative by the management to organize this event yearly. early, basically to recognize and to thank the Muslim staff here in Marina Bay Sands, that their effort to work under the hot sun, whether food and drink, without food and drink, basically show appreciation to the non-Muslim. And the fact that tonight's event, we also invited our non-Muslim friends, and so that they can enjoy and understand the culture and practice of the Islamic folks.
Out of curiosity, working time during Ramadan for Muslim staff?
There's no change in terms of working time. Basically, they work during their normal hours, but arrangement has always been made for the Muslim staff to have their breaks between 7 to 8 as much as possible. But if it's not possible, then you have team members who will eat quickly and then relieve some of the team members who are working at that time.
So far, all your colleagues and the other people under MBS's Muslim employees are happy with it?
Oh yes, definitely. I think today you can see the biggest turnout so far. We have today about 600 people joining, Muslim and non-Muslim, for tonight's iftar session.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Or the other one as well, or both together? Yeah, the two films. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So please tell us a little bit about the two artworks that you have here in the Art and Science Museum.
Yes, I have two films, Atmospheres and Desert Cloud, and these Atmospheres was made in the 1960s, which introduced the idea of interactive sculptures using air as a medium. Previously, all sculpture and painting had been static. So the idea there, which is avant-garde, is to have movement incorporated in the works, but also to have the participation of the public with the artwork. Now you notice in this museum still there are notices, do not touch. So there's very much a feeling of actually going out of the gallery into the real environment so that you could interact with the artwork, but in doing so you begin to interact with the environment itself. So it was an issue of reality. This is where it refers to the utopian title of this exhibition is very much about future, but also it's got the connotation of being impractical, things that don't work. Okay, so I've always been interested in things that do work. So the artworks themselves very much to do with how things work and how you can get them to work. For example, all my structures from the very beginning are using things that traditionally in architecture are considered as problems. So wind loading, condensation, overheating, these are all problems in architecture. So I was a student of architecture, but so I reversed this whole approach to the building of environment by saying, well, why not integrate the real behavior, so the heat, light and sound, to get the environment that you want. So this is adapting, incorporating into the environment. It's a very different approach from the modern art movement at the time, which is about enclosing the space, sealing it off, and then pumping in as much energy as you need to control in the interior. But all these structures are very much about being in the open and using the air, the atmosphere, the existing energy of the environment to control the building. So this is an artwork and not an architectural structure, as it is simply showing principles. So I often get asked, well, how do you make this work during the night, for instance? But it's simply a sculpture to demonstrate the principles. So it is art and science together, but it's also modeling the real possibility. So it uses imagination in a different sense. So it's asking you to imagine what you can do, but what you can actually realize Whereas painting traditionally and sculpture is being about imagining things that don't exist. Whereas this is about imagining what can exist in reality. Therefore, there's a shot of me coming around the structure, and I look very happy. The reason is, it's the first time it's ever worked. I couldn't test it in England because it's the wrong condition. So it's the first time that it's been confirmed that it actually works as an experiment. So this experiment is a success. And then it goes on to show all the applications. And the science, of course, is from the body of work of scientists. And I work with hundreds of scientists. We formed a scientific society about the use of solar energy in the Royal Institution in London, where we had all the expert scientists, Nobel Prize winners, and giving explanations of each renewable technology and how it could be made to work when it would become economically feasible.
Right. How long did it take you to complete that one experiment, that one that was a success?
That was done in 10 days.
Right.
So I made it, it took 2 or 3 days to make. But the thing is that I had to have the knowledge to make it work. And that was a projection. And interestingly, as an artist, it was not calculated. It was done from intuitive transposition of other works, like hot air balloons, but also of solar collectors, how hot it would get, so the temperature differential, all these things were just intuited and not calculated. A lot of scientists ask me exactly what the temperature was. I say, no idea.
Right.
But it is the first example of solar flight. So I claim to be the inventor of solar flight as opposed to hot air flight. And the other invention I claim is my first 3 inventions were the waterbed, the bouncy castle, and the beanbag. I did these as a student. So I did as a design exercise, but I filled 3 balloons with the 3 different materials: solid, liquid, and gas. Okay, this is the primary Greek idea, conception of environment, earth, air, fire, and water, is simplifying things. So it's very, very complex, the science of solar energy, but also it can be made very, very simple. So the idea of an artwork is to have the complete simplicity of just seeing a thing fly, which seems very simple.
Right. So what is the message that you're trying to
And the message is, the 2 messages. One, the first film is about the participation of the humans, the observer in the work and in the environment. So the 2 things, but with the body. The human body is interacting. So the body works in exactly the same way, heat, light and sound. So it's extending all the senses into the heat, light and sound of the environment. So you change the perception. Because once you participate in one of these works, when you bounce on a bouncy castle, it changes your perception of movement. But also, you cannot be oblivious of other people on the bouncy castle, because they're also moving. So this is, the philosophy is that you're not alone in the environment. Whatever you do affects the other person. So the 3 sculptures came from a whole line of artistic, philosophical thought for participation with all the senses. So before it was just the visual sense. You just look at something. It's a passive action, whereas with participation, it's an active interaction with the work. So you're getting something back, and what you get back depends on what you do. If you don't participate, if you don't walk on water, for example, this is one of my other main creations, is 6 ways of walking on water, or 7 ways of walking on water. So this has a whole cultural background of walking on water in Christianity. But it's a comment on the technology, that with technology you can now do things that were miracles in the past. Now we're performing miracles daily, and everywhere, locational. The whole globe is full of miracles.
Right. All right. Thank you very much, sir. I would like, you have got a very interesting piece. Unfortunately, we can't see it today. Could you tell us a little bit more about your artwork?
Yes, the piece as part of Floating Utopias exhibition I'm showing here is from 2012, and it will be installed by public opening on Saturday. So I don't know if you are in town till Saturday. But it has exhibited many times before. So the first occasion I exhibited it was in Belgium, part of a big public art exhibition in 2012. And then in Holland I exhibited it. In Berlin last year, that was the last time I exhibited the piece. So the piece has its own life. It was made for site specifically for that exhibition and for that city in Belgium, because it's referring a particular building, historical building, and that historical building right now is a museum and culture center, has a very significant past. For about 80 years it functioned as the first socialist cooperative, and it was an example model for first time practiced that way, run by the people of the city. So it was collectively owned by and run by the people of Ghent at the time, and a lot of people visited this model. So it was very unusual example and very inspiring example at the time. So I call this more like a practiced utopia. So it was not just an idea as an utopia, but it was very much practiced over almost 80 years. And what I did the inflatable floating castle, inspired from René Magritte's very famous painting. But instead of a mysterious castle, I put this very still present building, very concrete, very much a place that you can still go visit, but not functioning at the same way anymore. Until 1970, it was functioning as a socialist cooperative. So I wanted to make it visible right next to the building as a first attempt. By putting a replica of this building on top of this floating castle and making part of the view of the city. And then this work has traveled, as the idea at the time when what they were practicing was traveling. So they inspired a lot of, for instance, Marxists in Italy, or there is another building in New York, for art building in English it says forward on it, still you can go see. So it has become this global movement at a time, and it had even became from such a small town, it became such a global inspiration.
All right. You are now residing in, where are you residing now?
I live in between Amsterdam and Berlin.
Okay, so that's why.
But I'm from Turkey.
Yes, so that's why you had it exhibited in.
No, I get invitations from all around. Last year I was in Malaysia as well, and often to do site-specific works, and sometimes there's large-scale commissions like this one. And so I try to make sense of a work locally in that place where I produce, but also everything locally I refer in the work should be able to function elsewhere as well. So it's quite important for me experience to bring this work to Singapore at this moment after 8 years.
Okay, message to the people about this particular artwork. What is the actual message that we're looking for?
Actual message is this: inflatable forms of artworks is very common. So you can see very different approaches throughout the history in this show, and that's what I like about this show. It's a contemporary art exhibition, but it's hand in hand with the history, and practiced by science, even artists, architects, everyone who wanted to make such research and use and push their imagination, because they were the trigger in imaginations, also going to the outer space, and every experience today we experience as a concrete and real experience was a fantasy back in the days, and inflatables has an important role in that. So it's not only existing in the territory of art or only science, because you need a huge amount of dreaming involved and utopian thinking involved as well, but also it existed in a political sense, in redefinition of public space. So all these aspects are present in this exhibition, and also the inflatable I have done, and it comes with a story as well. So if you come to the exhibition, you'll be able to read this story as well.
Right, just a small thing I wanted to ask. Well, how would you actually encourage the younger generation to be part of this kind of projects?
You know, public space is actually another space that is like white cube, but it's not a white cube, and it's not a space you need to wait for an invitation. So for younger generations, and the way I also started making art was this self-motivation, producing artworks that doesn't require big budgets or an invitation from a white cube space, but redefinition of where we are. You know, public space is something like that, because as soon as something you put in public space, it becomes like it has its own audience already there, and an encounter that is not limited to an artwork encountering its audience, but it's actually people encountering the ideas, and that's what I can easily say. So you don't need to wait for an invitation or big budget to arrive to accomplish your dreams.
Thank you. Very well said.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed.
Fantastic.
All right, Dawn, can you please tell us a little bit about this artwork of yours?
Okay, so Walter was a project that took place in 2009. So in essence, he's a decade old right now. When he was first conjectured, I think one of the things that was most interesting to me was actually Singapore's landscape, and the fact that so much of it, because of the fact that it's everyday and ordinary, it sort of forms the invisible normal, things that we don't really take a second look at and we could just walk past. So the whole purpose of Walter was to insert an object that was so surreal and childlike and naive into an environment that was very commonplace, such that it kind of recalibrates your eyes to look at, I guess, a city and its landscape, almost with that sense of wonder of a child again.
Right, just wondering, why is Walter a rabbit and not some other animal?
I think it's because a lot of Singaporeans, they grow up eating this particular candy called the white rabbit candy. So it's something that's very familiar. And also, I mean, when you're growing up in Singapore, because of the small constraints of flats, you're either growing up with a pet that's a hamster or a rabbit. So it just felt that it was an animal that people were very familiar with.
Has Walter played a very important role in your life when you were a kid?
As in the rabbit? No, I did have a white rabbit at a period of time, but no, he was one of many that lived and died.
So how many Walters have there been? I mean, as you had said, that they do not last that long in this form and they turn colour.
So there has been 8 Walters made to date. There have been Walters that have been shown outside the Singapore Art Museum. Actually, one is acquired into their permanent collection, but he has also been loaned to various museums in France. So yeah, this is the 8th one, and this is actually the biggest one so far. We started out with a 6-meter one 10 years ago, and this is a 10-meter one today that really fills up the space. I think Walter was always meant to be a contextual art object, so he really had to have a certain impact and volume in a room.
So in total, you've placed Walter in how many locations?
38 different locations across Singapore.
And not only open spaces, but other unique spaces have you put in?
They were from everything to do with like local hawker centres to old schools to on top of a public space car park. I think the interesting thing about making Walter was that I gave myself a 6-month period during the time that he was inflated, to actually take buses across the island, going nowhere in particular. So it was really about the journey, and every time I saw something interesting, I would get off and photograph it, and I would go into a Rolodex of specs and spaces that I knew that the insertion of such a surreal object would really make it quite wonderful.
One last thing, could you just look into camera and give us a message as to what should everybody not forget about something that Walter is passing on through you?
Okay, I think.
Right, Anna, can you just tell us more about the Floating Utopia, the exhibition, and its objectives?
Sure. So we're standing here inside an exhibition called Floating Utopias at Art Science Museum in Singapore. And this is an exhibition which is poetic, playful and political. And it tells the social and artistic story of inflatable objects, how they've appeared in architecture, in technological innovation, in art and in activism since the first hot air balloon ascended from the surface of the planet in the 1700s.
Right, and could you please tell us also the duration of the exhibition?
So the exhibition opens this Saturday on the 25th of May, and it runs all the way to the end of September.
Right, and what about the reasons why one should come to this exhibition?
So this is a very unusual exhibition. It's the kind of exhibition that you would only find in Art Science Museum. It blends art, it brings together science and technology. It's looking at the idea of the inflatable almost as a symbol of the future of innovation. And these are objects which occupy a great deal of space when they're inflated. So these incredibly specific and unusual galleries at Art Science Museum really do provide the perfect home for large suspended floating objects. So this is a unique opportunity, I think, for our visitors in Southeast Asia to look at both the kind of history of inflatable objects all the way from the 1700s kind of through to the 20th century, and then in the work of contemporary artists and activists, what people are doing today with inflatables, but to also perhaps inspire their imagination about how they too can use inflatable objects to reimagine the world around them.
What about a sneak peek, or just tell us a little bit about the main attraction that we will not know until the day it happens?
How do you mean?
The one where people get together to make the floating...
Oh, the solar balloon?
Yeah,
okay,
right.
Sure. So I think one of the real highlights of this exhibition is the way that it invites the visitors to get involved and to participate, to really build their own utopia in a sense. And one of the key moments where we do this in the exhibition is through an artwork by the artist Thomas Saraceno, who for some time has been working on a series of works called Aeroscene. He's fascinated with how very large-scale balloons can be lifted into the air purely by the power of the sun, solar balloons. So as part of that ongoing artistic endeavour, we're inviting our visitors to make their own solar balloon. And we're doing this in the form of a workshop inside the gallery space where visitors can come, bring their own old plastic bags, and then use the plastic from plastic bags to create a large plastic fabric, all recycled material. And then at the end of the exhibition, once we have enough of it, we'll stitch this fabric together to create a gigantic, colourful patchwork balloon. And we'll launch this balloon into the sky. So this is something which speaks to, I guess, the power of collective action, how we can work together to create something meaningful as a community, but also talks about the importance of recycling and a more sustainable approach to living in harmony with nature.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting. And next, we would also like to know, other than the Floating Utopia, what can our viewers or viewers from outside Malaysia look forward to from the Art Science Museum?
So at any one time, we'd have around 3 to 4 major exhibitions on at Art Science Museum. So in addition to Floating Utopias, right now we also have our permanent exhibition, Future World, where art meets science, which is a partnership with the Japanese Art and Technology Collective Team Lab. We have 19 interactive installations for adults and for children, all of which invite the visitors to co-create the experience with the artists. This is a deeply immersive and sensory experience which almost has to be seen to be believed. We also have our exhibition Wonderland, which is a theatrical journey through the story of Alice in Wonderland, particularly looking at the way that Alice has been depicted on screen in movies and animation and on television over the last 100 years. And finally, we have a show called Rewild Our Planet, which is looking specifically at issues around the environment and sustainability. And this is a partnership with the Worldwide Fund for Nature and Netflix, and it uses some of the stunning footage that was shot for the natural history TV series Our Planet.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.